I can now tell you that based on our review of court records that have just posted, all three officers that were seen on that video have now been charged. We're talking about J. Alexander Kuhn, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao, court records indicate, have been charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder. Now, based also on those court documents, we see that the fourth officer, who had previously been charged with third-degree murder, we're talking about Derek Chauvin, court records indicate that his charge has now been elevated to second-degree murder.
Basically, we're out here to encourage everybody for their voice to be heard and to get out and vote. Well, when you look at past events that's been going on with the police brutality and everything in the world, this is why it's so important right now to vote.
This year's social justice protests, they had an impact on the polls. I'm talking about 90% of voters said that they factored the protest into their vote. And more than 75% said it was a major factor in how they voted. Now, these protests, they came from years and decades of degradation, but they were undoubtedly ignited by the police killing of George Floyd. In this past week, as we were all focused on the presidential race, a Minnesota court made several pivotal rulings that changed the entire trajectory of the case. Ready to break it down when it comes to those rulings and what they mean for the four officers charged in Floyd's death? I'm attorney Adrienne Lawrence, and this is Overruled. Welcome to TYT Overruled, where you get to be the judge. Your case for today concerns the murder trial of the four Minneapolis police officers involved in the killing of George Floyd. Here are the three things that you should know about the Minnesota judge's rulings and how they're going to impact the case. First, all four officers will be tried together. Even though they were all involved in Floyd's death and they all planned to argue the same kind of use of force was reasonable defense, each one of the officers had asked the court to have a separate trial. Why did they do that? Well, in their court filings, they kind of indicated that their strategy would be to essentially point fingers at one another. So I'm sure you can kind of glean from this that they wanted to create some kind of reasonable doubt in the minds of jurors by way of confusion. Also, if the results turned out to be different verdicts, then the officers could use it as leverage in an appeal to really show that the individual conviction wasn't sound because someone with the same evidence came to a different conclusion. But the reality is that having separate trials wastes resources, time, also wears down witnesses and the Floyd family. So the judge said no dice. Everybody gets tried together. Second, the court ruled that the trial will stay in Minneapolis. The officers didn't want this either. They had claimed that they couldn't get a fair trial in Minneapolis because of the press coverage. But the reality is, there's nobody in the world who really hasn't heard of the George Floyd case. It's gone international. So whether the trial be in Minneapolis or on Main Street, it really makes no difference. But that didn't mean that the officers wouldn't try to leverage the racial mapping of Minnesota. Minneapolis is one of the most racially diverse cities in the state, and the officers wanted to try to move their trial to a predominantly white suburb where they know their chances of getting off essentially and not being convicted is a lot higher. If you recall that this is what the officers did back in 1992 in that Rodney King case that was out in LA. The judge moved it from LA proper to a predominantly white suburban area, and they ended up getting off. So the trial here, when it starts in the spring, it's going to be in the city where George Floyd's life was taken, and it'll be decided by jurors who represent that city. Third, the jurors' names will remain anonymous, and the trial will be televised. Given potential safety issues for the jurors they could face from public and from law enforcement given the nature of this case, the judge said no, we're not going to make anyone's names available to the public, and that is a rare thing to do, but a very wise thing to do given the potential threats. Also, we don't want juror intimidation. We want people to make the decision based on the evidence, not based on some fears. The fact that the judge also made this trial available so it could be televised, that is also rare, but pretty wise. We're still in the middle of a global pandemic. Also, it's gonna be a media circus. And so, however the judge can find a way to keep the jury's anonymity, keep them also present, but also make sure that the world has complete access to this trial is unknown to me. That's it. Those are the 3 key updates in George Floyd's murder case. Do you think the judge's rulings, all of which went against the 4 officers, were wise decisions? Let me know your thoughts below. Also, hit me up on Twitter using #TYTOverruled and follow us for more. Catch you later.